You ready? Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4!
It's the Morning Blitz with Ross Volkmer.
Give me my cane. I'll show you how to play this game.
The region's only local sports talk.
Dynamite drop-in at broadcast school has really paid off.
Broadcasting on Goodland's Rocket 102.5, simulcasting on Goodland's 730 Gold KLOE.
Guy is everywhere.
Discussing it all from the preps
Touchdown, the Cowboys!
to the pros.
And Tendy back on the track. It's out of here. Bobby Witt Jr. delivers a go-ahead grand slam.
The Blitz is presented by Pearl Chevrolet GMC, Hoover Lumber Ace Hardware, and F&B Bank, as well as the Insurance Agency, Farmer State Bank in Oakley, the Cowboy Corner Express, and Equity Bank of Hoxie, Quinter, and Grinnell.
Let's go to work.
Here come the Jayhawks. I don't think he was trying to bank it, but it hit the backboard first. Can Dickinson hit a three? You bet he can! Hunter Dickinson from the top, and KU goes in front by 3. Harris hooks a pass out to Storr. He takes a 3. He makes a 3! A.J. Storr again. 2 big 3-point plays for Kansas. Dickinson at the top. Picks up his dribble. Hands off to Zeke. Drives left side. Up, under, and down. Zeke Mayo gets the deuce to go. KU by 8. And the Spartans will not foul. The final 5 seconds drip off the clock. His wagon's now loaded. His legacy cemented. Bill Self, KU's winningest coach of all time.
The sounds of last night from the State Farm Champions Classic as the Kansas Jayhawks beat the Michigan State Spartans 77-69. And what was the second best game of the night last night there from Atlanta. But hey, still a great win, and a historic win for Kansas men's basketball as once again, Bill Self picking up win number 591, surpassing Fogg Allen, and becoming the winningest coach in Kansas basketball history. But that's an amazing story. We'll dive in a little bit more deeper to that here coming up in today's show. But hey, good Wednesday morning, everybody. Glad you're with us here on the Morning Blitz. No matter which way you are doing so, whether it's Goodland's Rocket 102.5, NWKSradio.net, or, of course, the Hurl Chevrolet GMC video stream on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So glad you could be with us here on a Wednesday, November the 13th, 37 degrees outside to get things rolling here today. Temperature is going to reach the mid-50s. Probably a little breezy today as well. It's been breezy the last few days, but going to be a little windy out there with some cooler temperatures. I think temperatures are going to drop around 10 degrees, I think, on average around the listening area from what it was yesterday. A cooler day today, and we'll make our way up a little bit warmer here coming up a little bit later on. We'll have, like I said, 54 today, I think, is actually the coolest day of the week. And then we'll be anywhere in the low 60s to upper 50s the rest of the week. And then we look ahead to even next week, we got temperatures dipping down into the 40s, at least at this point in time. But once again, expecting to be windy, pretty windy, gusts up to 36 miles per hour at this point in time. And like I said, temperatures will be around 54 for today's high. But it's 37 degrees, but it feels like 20 out there because of that wind. So grab a coat. Going to be a cool one today. But glad you're with us again here on the Morning Blitz. Once again, if you'll notice, no Max Gershon with us today. He is out for the rest of the week. He is at a wedding for, I think it's his cousin. I think his cousin is getting married in California. And so he, I believe, is either on a plane or making his way to the airport to where he'll be getting on a plane and heading out to Cali for the next few days. He'll be back coming up on Monday. So you only got me today here on the Morning Blitz and for the rest of the week, but we hope to make it a good show. And honestly, it'll be even better if you chime in on the F&B Bank text line. That number is 785-899-2222. That's the number part of the Morning Blitz, the F&B Bank text line. Chime in with your thoughts and comments, particularly about the Kansas Jayhawks 77-69 win, and Bill Self picking up win number 591, surpassing Fogg. I know we got a lot of Jayhawk fans out there. So chime in with your thoughts from last night's game. Would love to hear from it and hear from you about that game last night. But we'll get to that here in just a matter of moments. We'll also talk about, I thought was maybe the statement of the night at the State Farms Champions Classic coming up here in a little bit. Also on today's show, we will be visiting with our good friend from Huskers 247 Sports or 24/7 Sports. That's Michael Bruntz. He'll join us on the Hoover Lumber Ace Hardware hotline coming up here in about 15 to 20 minutes. He'll be joining us and talking about the crazy stories going on up in Huskerland with losers of 3 in a row, needing one more win to get to bowl game, the change at offensive coordinator with 3 games left with a guy who was not even part of the football program most of the season. So we'll once again have Michael Bruntz join us at the bottom of the hour, and we'll squeeze in a very quick, at the end of the show, college football Power 5, as we've got a decent slate of games this week. Not a great slate, but a pretty good slate and some intriguing games if you really dig down into it. So we'll get to the college football Power 5 coming up in our third segment of the show. Before we get into Kansas's win over Michigan State, I want to quick pass along some updates from basketball last night. Locally, Colby Community College Hoops picking up a 78-73 win over Northeastern Junior College last night in Sterling. Eternity Igagi, I think is how you say his last name. He led the Trojans with game high 19 points on 7 of 14 shooting, very efficient. Gaius Maela came off the bench. He scored 14 points for the Trojans. CCC did a really good job, honestly, in that game of I think on both sides of the ball. They were really good defensively for the most part against Northeastern, which is a really good program. They were a good job defensively. They held their opponent to just 44% shooting. Well, they shot 50%. Other than that, and then, Colby got to the line 30 times, only made 16 of them, while the reason that I think Northeastern hung in a little bit closer was because of their shooting. They only missed 6 free throws, beg your pardon, 5 free throws on the night. But like I said, a great game from Eternity Igagi with those 19 points. They had 14 points from Kadir Muhammad, and Maxence Macedia had 10 points as well, but only made 3 of 10. But like I said, good performance from CCC, and with the win over Northeastern, they got it to a great start. They were up 44-33 at the end of the first half. They were actually outscored in the second half, but hold on to win by 5. But that improves the Trojans to now 4-1 on this young season. They have one more tune-up game. It's coming up here on Sunday. They will welcome in the junior varsity squad from McPherson College, not the high school, from the college, and they will they'll take them on Sunday night at 6:30 Central Time at the event center there in Colby. And then they begin Jayhawk Conference play with a couple of home games back-to-back before Thanksgiving. They'll host Independence and Coffeyville. So they can either go on the road to Independence and Coffeyville, or they could be home before Thanksgiving, and that'll work out well for CCC as they're at home for the first 2 Jayhawk Conference games. But CCC with the win, 78-73 over Northeastern yesterday, and a great victory for them. They're off to a 4-1 start. All right, transitioning into college basketball and what happened last night with KU as they get the win over Michigan State, 77-69. If you watched any of this game last night, it was certainly a rock fight, to say the very least. It was the first half was tough sledding for both teams. I mean, you look at how poorly Michigan State shot the ball to start, and if your name wasn't Hunter Dickinson in the first half, Kansas was. I mean, I think there was with 6 minutes left, maybe anywhere between around the 5-minute mark left to go in the first half. I mean, I'm pretty sure Kansas only had 17 points, and that was leading the way. And Michigan State was within 3 or 4. It was not a very pretty offensive first half, and that's exactly the way I would expect that Michigan State wanted that to go, because I just don't see them, after watching them yesterday, being a team that's going to put up a whole ton of points. They're going to have to muck up a lot of games in order to win, and they kind of did that. They made everybody except Hunter Dickinson uncomfortable. Hunter Dickinson carried them. I think he had 12 of their first 14 points, did Hunter, and he actually finished with 28 and 12 boards to go along on 13 of 21 shooting. So a very efficient day at the office for Hunter Dickinson, and he led the charge. And then later on in the game, some other guys got going. Rylan Griffin knocked down 2 threes. He got into double figures with 10 points. And then you had DeJuan Harris getting into double figures with 11 points, 6 assists, doing what he does best, being that great distributor. But he only shot at 2 of 7. You look at Kansas, they shot just 41%, if you round up, in that game last night. And Michigan State shot just 35%. 3-point shooting was very difficult for both teams. Kansas went 5 of 17, and Michigan State went just 3 of 24. And honestly, if it wasn't for Michigan State being able to make free throws, they made 18 of 21 in that game last night. I don't know if this game would have been a whole lot further apart. So I give Michigan State credit. They hung tough despite being, I think, kind of outmatched in that game. But once again, to me, that was all about Hunter Dickinson and how he was able to play. That was a pretty big gain for him. This is coming in on the FNB Bank text line, 785-899-2222. I knew Michael would be chiming in. Thank you, Michael, for listening. Coach Self better wake those boys up, because right now it's looking like another long season, Rock Chalk. Look, I don't. Why, Michael? Why do you say that? I would like to know why you think it's going to be another long season. Just because they had a poor offense? I mean, can't you balance this out with how they kind of played against North Carolina, particularly in the first half? And even though the second half was a little bit rocky, they still found a way to win that game. Can't you balance that out a little bit? I would think you would be able to do that. That's my 2 cents. I think you'd be able to balance that out. But I don't know. Maybe that's not the way the Jayhawk fans think. I think that you had you've looked pretty solid through the first couple of games. This was the first game away from home in a different arena. And I don't care who you are. Unless you practice or play a lot in a certain arena, you get used to the depth perception. And I think sometimes it's just more challenging for teams to make shots in those situations. And anybody who tried really outside shooting last night for Kansas or Michigan State, in the case of this game, really struggled with that in this contest. And so I always think that a little bit of depth perception plays a little bit of a part in these games, especially early on. And Kansas hadn't played away from home yet. This was their first road game, or it was a neutral site game, but a first game that they weren't in the fog of Allen Fieldhouse. So I know I get your point. It can be a little bit concerning, because I don't think Michigan State is going to be that great of a team. I mean, they had some guys that were just not very good. Akins, their point guard, went 1 of 8 shooting and had just 2 points. He was their leading scorer going into the game. Frankie Fiddler, I was glad I got to see him play. He was a guy who played at Omaha the last few years as a Nebraska guy. And if it wasn't for his free throw shooting, 8 of 8, he would have had a rough night. He went 3 of 12. I mean, it was not a good offensive performance from either team, particularly in the first half. It was really bad. I thought for a moment they weren't even going to get to 60 points in the game for how bad they were shooting in the first half. And KU led by 6, 30-24 at halftime. The offense and everything, the lid came off the rim in the second half, and both teams were able to put the ball in a little bit more. But 77-69, the win for Kansas. They get to 3-0. It wasn't gorgeous. Hunter Dickinson carried them. But that's what you expect out of a guy who's in his 8th year of college, it feels like. It's at least, I think, his 6th. He's been in a long time. So you expect him to be able to get those big-time points, and he did. But he led the way. Zeke Mayo had a bad offensive night, but contributed another way, getting 10 rebounds, which I thought was really big. So kudos to him on finding a way to contribute despite that. But, yeah, I don't know. At the 77-69, it's a win. You move on to, I think it's Oakland next. And, you continue trying to get better. I mean, if you're playing your best basketball right now at this point in time of the season, that's a problem. So you need to be in a position to where you are going to improve throughout the season. They've got things to work on at this point in time. At the same time, still picking up the win and getting Coach Bill Self his 291st win, in surpassing Fog Allen, his win total of 590. To me, it says a couple of things. It says, number one, you've been there a long time. As Bill Self said when the postgame interview, I'm old. That's what he said. And it's true. Bill Self has been there a very long time. And you just don't see this very often. You just don't see programs keep coaches for 20 plus years. It just does not happen very much. There are swoons in a coach's cycle at a place. But Kansas rarely ever has that. A swoon for KU is like getting into the NCAA tournament by the skin of their teeth. That's a swoon. And that rarely ever happens. And so give Bill Self a lot of credit. And I think another amazing stat that I heard last night, he's only, I think, the 9th coach in Kansas men's basketball history. That is crazy to think about. In the year, I mean, in a program that goes back to the late early 1900s, and he's, it's over 100 years old, and he's only been the 9th coach. And that's amazing. There's some places that have had 30 some odd coaches in their tenure of a university or a program. But he's only the 9th. So I don't know. Bill Self to me, he's a character. He's funny to listen to. He's got some great quotes. He's been there a long time. He's had great success. He's had great talent for many, many decades. And because of that, you do win a lot of games usually. And they've played in a tough conference. I'm going to say that he's done it and he's played in a tough. It's not like kind of, and I'm not trying to bash Mark Few here, but he's not like Gonzaga and Mark Few where you really don't play. You might have in conference maybe 2 to 4 challenging games a season in conference play. If you're Mark Few in the West Coast Conference, that's going to change here in a few years. But it's not like you're racking up wins because you don't play a difficult conference schedule year in and year out. I mean, Kansas is playing in the Big 12, one of the most difficult conferences in the country, and they continue to rack up wins. And Bill Self is at the precipice of that with, once again, 591. He'll have 600 before we know it, and continue to be fantastic there for Kansas men's basketball. But once again, Kansas with the win over Michigan State last night, 77-69. Boy, there was another game last night that I thought was just amazing. It was an amazing game, and that was the game that followed it. It was Kentucky taking on Duke in that nightcapper game. And I'll tell you why. The reason this game was interesting. First of all, Duke has the highest, for those who didn't watch or could care less, but Duke has the highest ranked college basketball recruiting class this year. I mean, it's nuts. They've got so many super talented players, led by none other than Cooper Flagg, who, by the way, last night had 26 and 12, but had a couple of bad turnovers on the last possessions, which ended up losing the Blue Devils this game. I mean, Duke led 46-37 in the first half. We're playing great. They got outscored 40-26 in the second half. They did not close, and that's one of the signs of a young basketball team. I mean, they've got, I think, 3 guys, maybe 4 guys in the starting 5 for Duke that are freshmen and are learning to play college basketball. And look, they don't look like freshmen most of the time. Cooper Flagg does not look like a freshman. Akon Knipple, the point guard, he does not look like a freshman at times. He's been great. So they've got a lot of super talented players, but they're young and they're still kind of learning the college game. And they got out to a great start. They just did not finish against Kentucky, who I think the biggest winner of the entire State Farm Champions Classic is none other than Kentucky head coach Mark Pope. This was a guy who, once again, was a guy who was, he's a Kentucky alum. He played in the games, I believe, with like Christian Laettner. Those around the early 90s, he was there playing for Kentucky. And then, he was the assistant coach at other places. He was recently the head coach at BYU. And when Calipari left and when they hired Mark Pope, and this is no offense to Mark Pope, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people outside of Kentucky like, who is that guy and why is Kentucky going with him? I mean, I think Kentucky took some big swings at some coaches and came up empty. I think they went out and they probably talked to Dan Hurley. They probably talked to some other big-time coaches, agents to see if they have any interest in coming to Kentucky. And, they kind of said, no, we're good. Thanks. And Mark Pope said, you know what, I'll take the job. And he had a good success replacing Coach Rose over there at BYU. And he had done a decent job. And I just remember them the last couple of years, they just were raining in threes left and right at BYU, particularly last year. But now he goes to Kentucky, where it's a blue blood program that has super high expectations. It is your Ohio State. It is your Texas in football, for example, of basketball. It's those type of schools. They have that expectation. And if you don't win right away or show that you're actually doing something worth the darn, they're like, we're good for you. We're good. We don't need you. And we'll move on to somebody else. Even they're ranked. They were 2-0 going into this game. And for them to come back and beat Duke in that stage, that's a huge win for Mark Pope. He is the biggest winner. He just proved that he could beat this super great class of freshmen with his group of guys, of some good freshmen, as well as a lot of transfers that he brought in from around the country. And so for Mark Pope to get this win last night, to me, he was the biggest winner of anybody, even more than Bill Self surpassing Fogg. It was just a huge win for him because now he's got the fans and stuff on their side. It was his first real test as a coach of Kentucky, and he passed it, coming from behind to get that win. And he has some really good players out there. The Carr kid, which is really talented young man, had 17 points. But yeah, to me, the biggest difference in the game, if you just want to go statistic-wise, it was 3-point shooting. That was the biggest difference in the game. You had Duke knock in just 4 of 23 threes, while Kentucky hit 10 of 25. That was the difference. If you're going to play basketball in this day and age, you have to be able to make threes, particularly at the collegiate level. It helps at the high school level, I'll tell you that much. But you have to be able to make three-point shots. If you cannot shoot the three ball at the collegiate level, you're probably just not going to have a good season. You have to be able to shoot the ball at a semi-decent clip, which I'm saying over probably 30% on season. Now, this is one game, and it's a bad game for Duke in that department. They'll be better throughout the season. But three-point shooting was the issue last night for Duke. You can't go 4 of 23 from behind the arc and expect to win. Most teams are going to knock in, at least probably double that, 6 to 8 three-pointers a game at minimum. And if you hit 4, that's just not good enough. Got to make more threes. Once again, I think a depth perception thing plays into that factor a little bit in a different rim, a different arena you're not used to playing in. It happens. But that's the biggest thing. I mean, there are teams. I think that's why you're seeing. I think that's why you're seeing a lot of teams, a lot of like mid-major teams have success against the bigger schools nowadays, not only in the tournament, but actually kind of in the preseason when they're playing non-conference. I think you're starting to see that these teams can go out there and they can score the basketball and they can knock in, 8 to 10 threes a game. And the other team has to hit that same amount or it's not going to be, threes are more than twos, obviously, basic math. I got it. Just watching other games, just watching mid-majors take on the programs. Why are they hanging around for half? Because they're knocking in threes. The other team is really not. Yes, the other teams may have all the size inside and can rebound the basketball, that stuff. But if the other team with a bunch of smaller guys can hit a whole bunch of threes, that's how you even the score. And we see that a lot in the NCAA tournament, and we're seeing it a lot here early on in the season. I'm not saying Kentucky has no size and they got a bunch of – no, I'm not saying that at all. But my point being is that you got to be able to make threes in college basketball if you're going to have success in the long term. And so you got to be able to hit your three-point shots. We'll see if this comes back to be an issue for Duke as the season progresses on. I don't think it will be. I expect Kentucky to be a good three-point shooting team because Coach Pope's teams shot the three well at BYU. And so once again, if you want to be a good basketball team, you can have all the size of the world, but you got to be able to hit threes at a semi-decent clip if you're going to be good in today's college basketball realm. All right, there you go. Okay, some thoughts on the State Farm Champions Classic from last night there in Atlanta. Okay, let's get to a break. When we come back, we are going to be joined by Michael Bruntz of Huskers 24/7 Sports. Look forward to visiting with Michael about the situations going on up at Nebraska. Stick around. Plenty more to get to here on a Wednesday morning on the Morning Blitz.
It's the Morning Blitz.
We're having a great time, couple of laughs, everything's nice.
Weekday mornings from 7 to 8 Mountain, 8 to 9 Central.
F&B Bank text line chiming in, talking about that win for Kentucky over Duke, and saying that, experience wins in close games almost all the time. No, it's very true. The experience is there, and guess what? They're putting Duke in the Coach Shire for Duke is putting his players in those situations to have success at this point in time. He's putting guys in that position to have success at this point in time. And so, putting these guys in these situations so that they learn to have success for later on when it matters most in the tournament. That's my point there. So, anyway, okay, let's continue on here on the Morning Blitz. We will get to the College Football Power 5 in our final segment, but up next, it's time to visit with our good friend from Huskers 24/7 Sports. Never a dull day up there in Nebraska, covering Nebraska football. And we're pleased to be joined now on the Hoover Lumber Hardware Hotline by our good friend Michael Bruntz. Once again, Michael Bruntz there joining us on the Hoover Lumber Ace Hardware hotline. Great stuff there from him. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we will wrap up the show with the NFL Power 5. We will get to that here coming up in just a matter of moments. But if you want to be a winner from the Kansas Lottery, you can do so. We have our holiday instant scratch tickets. I have another chance to give away a couple more tickets today. So text in the word holiday to 785-899-2222. That's the word holiday to 785-899-2222. And you could be a winner from the Kansas Lottery. All right, back with more right after this here on a Wednesday morning edition of the Morning Blitz.
It's the Morning Blitz.
We're having a great time, couple of laughs, everything's nice.
Weekday mornings from 7 to 8 Mountain, 8 to 9 Central.
All right, shout out to Drew and Mike. They chimed in on the FNB Bank text line. They are the winners from the Kansas Lottery. Gentlemen, we will get you your tickets sent your way. Thank you again for listening. Really appreciate it. Once again, Mike and Drew are winners from the Kansas Lottery. Thank you to Michael Bruntz for joining us on the show here today as well. All right, we don't have a lot of time to do this, but we're going to try and squeeze it in anyway. I knew it'd be fighting the clock here, so let's dig into it. It's the College Football Power 5. All right. Like I said, I said early in the show, I think the College Football Power 5 this week is a good slate. It's not a great slate, but I think it's a little bit above where it's been in the past few weeks. Starting out with their honorable mention game, that'd be number 20 Clemson going to Pitt at this point in time. Both these teams are 7-2 going into this contest. This is a big-time game when it comes to being in the standings of the ACC. And for kind of that race of who's going to make it to that championship game at this point in time in the ACC. But you've got Clemson sitting there at 7-2 overall, 6-1 in conference. Pittsburgh 7-2, they're 3-2. But a win can get them a little bit closer in this ACC race. But two 7-2 teams makes them an honorable mention game. Although I think Clemson, who is going to be on the road, favored by 10, I think still wins this game probably pretty decently. At this point in time. My number 5 game, I'm going to the American Athletic Conference. I believe that's right. They change conferences all the time. Another 10 a.m. Mountain, 11 o'clock Central Time kickoff as Tulane, the 25th ranked Green Wave, now up to 8-2. One of those losses, of course, coming to Kansas State earlier in the season, but they have won their last 5 games, while Navy, after getting off to an unbeaten start, at 6-0, lost 2 in a row to Notre Dame and then Rice, unexplainably, and then bounced back with the win last week, taking down South Florida 28-7. Look, and you look at the American Athletic Conference, you have got these two teams vying for that second spot And these are this is to an extent kind of a play-in game to the AAC championship game, conference championship game. Army sitting at the top at 7-0 in conference play. Tulane is 6-0. If Navy beats Tulane, all of a sudden you've got Army and Navy not only playing for, in their great game, but possibly also in the American championship game. So there's a chance you could get 2 Army-Navy games. Possibly. We'll see. But Army-Navy, this is kind of a playing game because really, barring the rest, Memphis is a little bit further down there. East Carolina is. Those teams could get in if the other 2 teams fall apart, but these 2 teams are up there with Navy in the top 3 of the American. So this, to me, is a play-in game for that championship possible spot and possibly an automatic bid to making it into the college football playoff. It's somewhat of an elimination game between Navy and Tulane. All right, moving on to number 4 here on the College Football Power 5, going to the SEC, where you've got a ranked-on-ranked game. There's not many of those this week, just a couple of them, both in the SEC. But this game features what is South Carolina at home hosting Missouri. Number 21, South Carolina against number 23, Missouri. The Tigers are 7-2, coming off a nice win over Oklahoma in kind of a crazy football game. And South Carolina is really rolling now. After a 3-3 start, they are 6-3. They've rattled off 3 wins in a row. Oklahoma, Texas A&M, which was a huge win at home and against a ranked team. And they took down a Vanderbilt squad last weekend, which has been very, very good all year long. So Missouri, though, has played good at times this year, questionable at others. When they've lost big. And when they've won, it seems like they've won close. So this could be one of those games where Missouri could possibly get over South Carolina. It should be a very evenly matched game. And right now they've got South Carolina as a 12-point favorite. I don't know. I feel like Mizzou could probably cover that, but we'll find out more coming up here in the coming days. Continuing on the College Football Power 5 here in week number 12. Number 3, we're going closer to home, at least with one of the teams. It's Kansas on the road at BYU. I don't know how this worked, but both Kansas schools had to go on the road to BYU this year, and both got to play in nighttime games. This is going to be a very difficult environment to play in. Kansas State knows this already after BYU beat them earlier in the season. But the reason this game fascinates me, I know Kansas is 3-6. I know BYU is the 6th-ranked team in the country, and they have a first-round bye because they're sitting atop of the Big 12 Conference right now. But I'm telling you right now, this game, to me, if I was BYU, I'd be scared because this is a Kansas team that has underperformed at this point in time in the season. But they've got all the talent, and it looks like as if they're starting to put it together. And if they can do that, look out. That's going to make it super interesting. And I do mean super interesting when they put this all together. So if Kansas puts it all together in the football field, they can give BYU a run for their money. It will be a tough environment to win in, but I still think it could be very, very interesting game, which is why it's number 3 on my College Football Power 5. By the way, Kansas only a 3-point dog on the road at night in BYU. Tell you how much people think Kansas is a much better team than what their record says it is. Number 2 for me on the Cultural Power 5, a little bit of a homer pick here, but I think it's an interesting game with the Desperation Bowl. You've got Nebraska at USC. Both teams are desperate for wins. They need to get a W to feel better about their seasons. For Nebraska to get to a bowl game for the first time possibly in over 7 years. For USC, it's taking a step towards getting towards a bowl game. Both, Lincoln Riley's feeling a little bit of pressure. Matt Rule's feeling some pressure. They both made changes. Matt Rule brought in Dana Holgerson as a new offensive coordinator for the last 3 games, which is so interesting. And then, of course, USC changed up the quarterback to Jaden Mayava, who transferred from UNLV to USC. He's a very, very talented quarterback, has a little bit of a running threat, unlike Miller Moss. So that makes it intriguing for the Nebraska defense to try and stop it. And how does USC know how to handle Dana Holgerson and what he's going to bring to the table? I'm telling you, to me, it's a fascinating game. So many storylines, could go in so many different directions. Nebraska, a 9-point dog on the road at USC. Be very interesting to see how that game plays out. And finally, number 1, we go to the SEC for what is, they said even last night on the Cultural Playoff ranking show, it's kind of an elimination game. Tennessee going to Georgia. If Georgia loses this game at 7-2 and the 12th-ranked team loses at home to Tennessee, who's 8-1 and number 7th-ranked team, their chances of making the playoff is done for Georgia. They'll have 3 losses more than likely. But Georgia at home, a 10-point favorite. Tennessee's quarterback, Nico's a little bit dinged up. I don't really see that happening. But to me, this is kind of an elimination game for Georgia. If they don't win this game, then they're going to be outside looking in for the College Football Playoff. Tennessee's sitting in a good spot, but they'd love to get a win over a Georgia program. Tennessee's come in winners of 4 in a row. And, of course, Georgia coming off a loss to Ole Miss last weekend. How do they bounce back? There you go. The College Football Power 5 for week number 12. Once again, in recapping, got Clemson at Pitt in the honorable mention game. Tulane at Navy, kind of a play-in game to their conference in the American at number 5. Number 4, Missouri at South Carolina, very evenly matched game in the SEC. An intriguing 3-win Kansas team on the road at unbeaten BYU. I'm telling you, that could be an upset. And then Nebraska at USC in the Desperation Bowl is number 2. And then Tennessee at Georgia. Once again, a possible elimination game from the cultural playoff if you're a Dog fan, if you lose in that number 1 game. So there you go, the College Football Power 5 here in week number 12. Like I said, it's a pretty good, those 5-6 games right there are pretty darn good. I don't know if they're the best. It's not the best week of games or slate of games that you could possibly pull out, but I'd say overall it's still pretty darn good. All right, to the walk-off.
A 3-run walk-off home run. A game-winning walk-off with a walk-off.
His second walk-off hit of the season.
In walk-off fashion. That baby's go.
Jared chiming in on the F&B Bank text line saying no Colorado or Utah in my look. I think that game is going to be a good one, Jared. I think it is. It's got intriguing storylines. I just don't know. I don't know what Utah has left in the tank, and they seem like they're so close, but they've lost a lot of these close games, and I don't know. I feel like Colorado probably is going to get this done. Oh, great defense. Couldn't agree more with you. Great defense there for Utah. They're fantastic. And that's a great match between Colorado and that defense. But I don't know. I'll tell you what, the way Colorado's playing right now, I don't know if anybody's really going to stop them. At least, I don't know who's going to stop them at this point in time. They're just playing so good right now. Give Colorado and Coach Prime a lot of credit. And I mentioned the College Football Playoff rankings. Those came out yesterday. Once again, you've got Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, Indiana, making it into the top 5 at this point in time. Right now, if the playoff were to be played today, Boise State at Ohio State, Ole Miss at Penn State, Alabama at Indiana. That'd be so interesting. Alabama at Indiana. Who would have thought that? Notre Dame at Tennessee. By the way, Kansas State sitting there at 17th. Colorado, I think, just right behind him at 18th at this point in time in the college football rankings. All right, that'll do it for our show. Thank you to Michael Bruntz, and thanks to all of you out there listening. We'll be back again tomorrow with another edition of the Morning Blitz. Hope you tune in and join us. We'll see you on a Thursday.